So now we've started tracking. Awesome. What we got to do is we have to make sure that we're using our points, our calories, really strategically to make sure that we're actually getting a good amount of food in while still being able to enjoy what you want. Now, when you first download the app, here's something that I definitely recommend you do. Play around with it a little bit. Try the barcode scanner, scan some of your favorite foods that you have laying around the house, type in some of the things you really enjoy eating, and start to learn a little bit about what the calorie intakes and what the actual macro breakdown of these things are. Now, for example, if you love salmon, that's awesome. A salmon fillet is about 21 grams of fat. That's not bad. It's not a bad fat either. It's an unsaturated fat, so it's actually quite good for you. That being said, if you only have 60 to 50 grams of fat a day, well, you got to be a little strategic if you want to have that salmon. You got to make sure you're low on your other fats for that day. So, if you really wanted to have that piece of salmon or that avocado, that's okay. You can have that. Just make sure that you plan it strategically so that you don't end up having to get really creative trying to find foods that are all carbs and fats and no protein, for example, to try to not go over. And in the beginning, you probably will go over, at least in the macros, maybe in the calories. That's okay. I'd recommend for the first 4 to 7 days, focusing on just making it a habit, pulling out your phone when you eat something and tracking it down, because it makes it way easier to stay on top of this when you're used to doing it. Now, one other thing that you got to know before we get into anything else. When you are tracking your macros, make sure that you're tracking the actual ingredients of the food too. Let me use a prime example. I made a fish sandwich earlier today, and it was really delicious. However, for my fish sandwich, here's how I had to track it. I tracked the bread I used, the cheese that I put on it. I tracked any condiments that I put on my sandwich, such as tomatoes, such as a little bit of mayo for the bread, etc., etc. I tracked the trout, and I tracked the oil that I used on the trout, as well as the seasoning that I used on the trout. Does that sound like a bit of a pain? A little bit. And in the beginning, it's going to kind of suck. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. However, you're going to start to enjoy it. And when you start to see really good results from it, and you start to feel good because you're putting in your body what it actually needs, even better. Another rule of thumb that I would totally recommend going forward is try to incorporate at least one fruit and vegetable onto every single plate, because it's going to help you to get a lot of those micronutrients, which you're going to need in terms of having higher energy levels, actually make sure your body's running properly, and continuing to have that good up feeling. If you want to include multivitamins in this system, I wouldn't be against it at all. For myself, I really enjoy multivitamin. I feel that it's a good addition to anyone's diet, as long as you're taking one that's not claiming to be a miracle pill, because miracle pills don't exist. And yeah, maybe a little bit of fish oil too. For me, I take fish oil as well. Now that we got all the basics of how we're going to do it, let's talk about what we're actually going to do.